The howling winds of Proxima's endless winter tore through Kira's thin membrane coat as she clutched her child Tilo tighter against her chest. Blood, silvery blue and rapidly crystallizing in the sub-zero temperatures, leaked from the gash. Across her shoulder where the Elder's ceremonial blades had marked her as outcast. "Rest, little one," she whispered in her native tongue, a melodic series of clicks and hums that echoed faintly before being swallowed by the storm. Tilo's normally vibrant skin had paled to a sickly grey, the child's four-fingered hands trembling, despite being tucked beneath Kira's remaining thermal wrap. The snow accumulated around them, building a white tomb that paradoxically offered some shelter from the wind, but threatened to bury them completely. Kira's strength, once celebrated among her people for its remarkable endurance, was failing. Her body temperature dropped dangerously as the cold seeped into her bones. "They were wrong about you," she murmured to Tilo, stroking the child's ridged forehead. "Your differences make you beautiful." Tilo had been born with eyes of amber instead of the species' typical obsidian black, a mutation the superstitious elders had declared an ill omen. When the war with the human colonists had intensified, they'd needed someone to blame. The mother who dared defend her child became an easy target. Banishment meant certain death on Proxima, especially during storm season. Kira had known this when she'd stood against the elders, but watching her child fade in her arms made the finality of her choice unbearable. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her normally melodic voice cracking as her vocal membranes began to freeze. "I couldn't save us." 8 kilometers away, Jace Everett squinted at the thermal scanner in his gloved hand, adjusting the sensitivity as the device struggled against the magnetic interference of the storm. The rest of his humanitarian medical team had retreated to their base camp when the blizzard hit, but Jace had pressed on, convinced he'd detected life signs near the abandoned border region. "Commander Rivera, I'm picking up 2 signatures," he reported into his comm unit. "Faint but definite, sending coordinates now." "Negative, Everett," came the immediate response. "All personnel are ordered to return to base immediately. The ceasefire agreement specifically prohibits contact with Proximan civilians without diplomatic clearance." Jace frowned, watching the fading heat signatures flicker on his scanner. "With respect, Commander, these readings suggest at least 1 juvenile. They won't survive another hour in these temperatures." "That's an order, Medic. The diplomatic situation is too volatile. We can't risk—" Jace switched off his comm unit, making his decision. 6 months on this frozen hellscape had taught him that bureaucracy moved too slowly for survival. The war between humans and Proximans had already claimed too many innocent lives. He secured his thermal pack and adjusted his oxygen mix for the increased exertion. The blizzard obscured visibility to mere meters, but his scanner provided direction. Each step sank knee-deep into the snow, the specialized suit barely keeping his core temperature stable as he pushed against the howling wind. "Just hold on," he muttered, though no one could hear him. "I'm coming." The twin moons of Proxima briefly broke through the storm clouds, casting an eerie blue glow across the alien landscape. In that moment of clarity, Jace caught sight of a small mound of snow with a faint shimmer of blue Proximan blood. His medical training kicked in as he rushed forward, heart pounding. What he would find might change everything, not just for the beings dying in the snow, but for Jace himself. Some boundaries once crossed could never be restored, and as he approached the nearly buried forms of mother and child, Jace knew his life was about to change forever. Jace dropped to his knees beside the snow mound, quickly brushing away the crystalline powder to reveal the alien forms beneath. The mother's skin, normally a rich purple according to his field guide, had faded to a dull lavender, her silver flecked, eyes barely open. The child curled against her chest appeared even worse, its small body trembling violently. "I'm here to help," Jace said, knowing his translator would convert his words into the melodic Proximan language. He worked swiftly, pulling out his emergency thermal blanket and activating the heat cells. The mother's eyes widened in fear when she registered his human face. She attempted to pull away, wincing as the movement reopened her shoulder wound. "Please," Jace said, keeping his voice gentle while assessing her injuries. "I'm a medic. Your child is dying." Her gaze darted between Jace and her child. After a moment's hesitation, she relaxed slightly, allowing him to wrap the thermal blanket around the little one. "Tello," she whispered, her translator struggling with the complex syllables. "His name? Tilo." "And you?" Jace asked, applying a quick seal bandage to her shoulder wound. The silvery blood had nearly crystallized, which was actually preventing worse hemorrhaging. "Kira," she responded, her voice weak. Jace nodded, quickly calculating their options. The base was too far, and his emergency shelter wouldn't withstand the storm. His scanner indicated an abandoned research station 3 kilometers east, their only hope. "I'm Jace," he said, administering a small dose of universal stabilizer into her uninjured arm. "I need to move you both. The storm is getting worse." Without waiting for permission, he wrapped his own insulated jacket around the child and secured Tello to his chest. Then, with careful movements, he lifted Kira onto his back. She was lighter than he expected, her alien physiology seemingly more delicate despite her height. "Hold on," he instructed, feeling her arms weakly encircle his neck. The journey was brutal. Each step through knee-deep snow drained his strength, the added weight challenging his balance. The wind drove ice crystals against his exposed face like tiny knives. His suit's heating elements strained to capacity, battery warnings flashing. Across his heads-up display, halfway to the station, Kira began speaking, her voice barely audible above the howling storm. "Why?" she asked. "Your kind, my kind, enemies." Jace adjusted his grip, ensuring she wouldn't slip. "Not everyone believes in this war." He felt her head rest against his shoulder, perhaps from weakness, perhaps in silent acknowledgement. The child, Tilo, had stopped shivering, which worried Jace even more. Hypothermia in Proximans progressed differently than in humans, but the outcome would be the same. When the silhouette of the research station finally appeared through the swirling snow, Jace nearly collapsed with relief. His muscles screamed with exhaustion as he navigated the final distance, each step a victory against the merciless cold. Inside the abandoned structure, emergency systems still functioned. Lights flickered on as they entered, responding to motion after years of darkness. Jace gently lowered Kira onto a dusty examination table before carefully unwrapping Tello from his chest harness. "Stay with me," he told them both, activating the station's heating protocols. He retrieved medical supplies from cabinets, grateful the facility hadn't been completely stripped during evacuation. As warmth gradually filled the room, Kira's eyes focused more clearly on Jace. She watched as he tended to her child first, applying warming pads designed for Proximan physiology and administering fluids. "The elders said humans have no soul," she whispered, observing his careful ministrations to her son. "That you came to steal our world." Jace met her gaze as he moved to treat her wounds. "Some came to conquer," he admitted. "Others came to understand." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Outside, the storm raged with undiminished fury, but inside the station something new had begun. Fragile as a seedling in winter, but stubbornly persistent. Survival for now was enough. But Jace sensed that whatever had drawn him through, the storm to these strangers would demand more than medical attention. It would demand courage of an entirely different kind. 3 days passed within the confines of the research station. The blizzard showed no signs of abating, trapping them in their unexpected sanctuary. Jace had disabled his locator beacon after sending a cryptic message to his commander. Found. Survivors will return when safe. He knew the consequences would be severe, but watching Tello's strength gradually return confirmed he'd made the right choice. The station, once used for cross-species agricultural research, provided all they needed: rations compatible with both physiologies, medical supplies, and most importantly, safety from the elements. As Kira recovered from her injuries, the awkward silence between them evolved into cautious conversation. "Your wound is healing well," Jace observed on the third morning, changing her bandage. Her skin felt surprisingly soft beneath his fingertips, its texture somewhere between silk and velvet. He tried to maintain clinical detachment, but found himself increasingly aware of her as a woman, not just a patient. "Your medicine works differently than ours," Kira replied, watching his hands work with open curiosity. "We use living compounds, symbiotic organisms." "I'd love to learn about that," Jace said, genuinely interested. His trained eyes noted how her color had deepened back to rich purple, a good sign of returning health. Later that day, as Tilo slept peacefully in a nest of blankets, Kira approached Jace with something cradled in her palms. It was a small, luminescent crystal that pulsed with gentle blue light. "A gift," she explained, placing it in his hand. "From my homeland. It responds to emotions, a reminder that feelings transcend physical form." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending an unexpected current through Jace's body. The crystal flared brighter in his palm, betraying emotions he hadn't fully acknowledged. "It finds truth when words cannot," Kira whispered, her silver-flecked eyes meeting his. That evening, Kira showed Jace how to prepare the station's food, stores in the traditional Proximan way, their shoulders occasionally touching as they worked side by side. He taught her human card games to pass the time, laughing at her competitive spirit when she quickly began winning. As Jace settled into his makeshift bed across the room that night, Kira's voice came softly through the darkness. "My people believe exile is worse than death," she said, "but I wonder now if it was actually freedom from hatred I never truly felt." Jace turned toward her silhouette. "What will you do when the storm ends?" "There is no returning," she replied, "and nowhere to go. There are human settlements that would welcome you," he offered, "places where species doesn't matter." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. The following day, while checking the station's communications array, Jace felt Kira's presence behind him. He turned to find her standing closer than expected, her expression vulnerable. "You risk everything for strangers," she said, reaching up to trace a healing frostbite mark on his cheek. "Your career, your life." Her touch left trails of warmth on his skin. Without thinking, Jace caught her hand in his, holding it against his face. The crystal in his pocket began to glow, visible even through the fabric. "Not strangers anymore," he said softly. Their first kiss was tentative, an exploration of differences that somehow highlighted their similarities. Her lips were cooler than a human's, but just as soft. When they pulled apart, both seemed equally surprised by what had happened. That night, with Talo sleeping soundly, they sat together watching the storm through the station's reinforced windows. Kira leaned against Jace's shoulder, their fingers intertwined, the glowing crystal casting blue shadows across their joined hands. Outside, two worlds remained at war. Inside, they had created something new, something neither of their species had imagined possible. It was fragile and unnamed, but it felt like hope. 2 weeks into their isolation, the routine they'd established began to feel remarkably like home. Jace woke each morning to find Tilo already perched on the edge of his cot, eager to learn new human games. The child had recovered completely, his amber eyes bright with curiosity and trust. Although only 6 in Proximan years, Tello absorbed languages with astonishing speed, often switching between his native tongue and broken English mid-sentence. "Look, Jace," Tello called proudly, displaying a drawing he'd created using the station's archive paper supplies. The picture showed 3 figures holding hands beneath Proxima's twin moons, one tall purple figure, one small purple figure, and one human. "That's beautiful," Jace said, ruffling the child's ridged head affectionately. "Is that us?" "Family," Tello replied simply, the translator unnecessary for the universal concept. The word lingered in the air as Kira entered from the hydroponics bay, carrying fresh vegetation she'd coaxed from the station's dormant systems. Her eyes met Jace's over Tilo's head, acknowledging the weight of her son's innocent observation. Later, when Tilo had fallen asleep, Jace and Kira stood together in the station's observation dome. The storm had finally begun to lose strength, occasional breaks in the clouds revealing stars that seemed to hang just beyond reach. Jace's arm encircled Kira's waist, her body fitting perfectly against his side. "He sees you as his father now," Kira said softly. "I should discourage it." "Why?" Jace asked, turning to face her. "Because this," she gestured between them, "cannot continue outside these walls. Your military, my people, neither would accept it." Jace took her hands in his. Over the past weeks, he'd memorized every detail of her, the subtle patterns on her skin that shifted with her emotions, the way her pupils expanded into perfect circles when they made love, how her laughter sounded like distant wind chimes. "I've spent my life following orders," he said, "being what others needed me to be, until I walked into that storm to find you." Their embrace deepened, urgency replacing tenderness as they sought to lose themselves in each other. Clothing fell away. As they made their way to Jace's quarters, their bodies now familiar territories of pleasure. Their lovemaking had evolved from curious exploration to something profoundly intimate, each touch conveying emotions that transcended their different biologies. Afterwards, lying together in the darkness, Kira traced the contours of Jace's face, as if committing it to memory. "If they find us," she began. "When?" Jace corrected gently. "When they find us, my team won't stop looking." The reality of their situation hung heavy between them. The communication system had finally picked up signals the previous day. The human rescue squadron was sweeping the sector systematically. It would be days, not weeks, before they were discovered. "What then?" Kira asked, her voice barely audible. "Before," Jace could answer. The station's perimeter alarm blared to life. They both froze, eyes wide in the sudden flood of emergency lighting. "Proximity alert," the automated system announced. "Multiple signatures detected. Human life signs confirmed." They dressed hurriedly, Jace's mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. By the time they reached the main area, Tello was already awake, frightened by the alarms. "It's going to be okay," Jace promised, lifting the child into his arms while checking the security feed. Through the snow-obscured cameras, he could make out the unmistakable silhouettes of military-issue snow rovers approaching. Kira stood tall despite her fear, her hand finding Jace's. "Whatever happens," she said firmly, "we face it together." The crystal in Jace's pocket glowed its brightest blue yet, illuminating their joined hands with pulsing light as the station's external doors began the decontamination sequence. Their sanctuary was about to be breached, and with it, the delicate world they'd built. But as Jace squeezed Kira's hand, he made a silent vow. Some boundaries once crossed were worth fighting for. Commander Rivera's face remained impassive as she surveyed the scene before her, a human medic standing protectively beside an alien woman and child. The rescue team behind her kept their weapons lowered, but ready, uncertainty evident in their postures. Medic Everett, Rivera said coldly, you violated direct orders and the terms of our ceasefire agreement. With respect, Commander, Jace replied. I was fulfilling our primary mission, humanitarian aid, regardless of species. The standoff might have escalated if not for a sudden movement from Tilo. The child stepped forward, clutching his drawing, and extended it toward the commander. The simple gesture, so innocent and brave, momentarily disarmed the tension. Rivera accepted the paper, her expression softening almost imperceptibly as she examined the three figures holding hands. The child would have died, Jace continued, quietly. His mother, too. They were exiled by their own people. They have nowhere to go. This isn't a refugee operation, Everett. Then make it one, Jace challenged. We came to this planet talking about peace while preparing for war. Here's a chance to demonstrate what peace actually looks like. A communications officer approached, Rivera whispering something that caused her to frown. It seems your situation has attracted attention beyond our chain of command, she informed Jace. Central Command has been monitoring our search efforts. They're interested in your diplomatic initiative, as they're calling it. Hours later, seated in the station's conference room, Jace and Kira faced a holographic projection of General Harlow, the operations commanding officer. Your actions were reckless, Everett, the general stated, but potentially valuable. Relations with the Proximans have reached a stalemate. Both sides are exhausted, but neither will concede. Your unique situation offers an unexpected opportunity. Kira spoke up, her voice steady despite her nervousness. My exile proves not all Proximans support the Elders' policies. There are many who seek peace, but fear speaking out. The general nodded thoughtfully. Would you be willing to serve as cultural ambassadors? Both of you. It would mean living in the demilitarized zone, challenging work with no guarantees. Jace and Kira exchanged glances, a lifetime of possibilities contained in that single look. Yes, they answered in unison. 3 months later, the small outpost at the border between human and Proximan territories had grown into something unprecedented, a settlement where both species lived and worked together. What began as a diplomatic experiment had evolved into a community, with more families from both sides seeking refuge from the conflict. On the settlement's highest point, overlooking valleys that stretched toward both territories, Jace and Kira stood hand in hand. The formal ceremony had combined traditions from both cultures, his vows spoken in her language, hers in his, while representatives from both governments witnessed their union. Tello ran circles around them, now wearing a special uniform designating him as the settlement's youngest ambassador. Other children, both human and Proximan, had joined him in play, their laughter a harmony that neither species could have created alone. They're calling it the Everett Accord, Jace said, shaking his head in disbelief. The official treaty signing is next month. Should we tell them it wasn't politics that ended the war? Kira asked, leaning against him. Just one human walking into a storm. Jace smiled, pulling the luminescent crystal from his pocket, now fashioned into a pendant they would share, passing between them on alternating days. It pulsed with steady blue light, stronger than ever. Some truths don't need explanation, he said, kissing her as the twin moons rose above them. In the valley below, lights from the growing settlement twinkled against the darkness, each one representing a family, a story, a choice to reach across boundaries. What had begun with compassion in a snowstorm had blossomed into something neither world could have imagined. And somewhere in the great halls of both governments, leaders who had never thought peace possible were beginning to see another way forward, all because one human and one alien had chosen love over fear, hope over history, and the future over the past. As night fell completely over the settlement they now called Haven, Jace and Kira walked home to begin their new life together, no longer alien to each other, but family. 3.7. Sonnet.